courage. The courage to do the right thing in a given situation, even if the right thing is against the rules. That's what David did when he fed his companions sacrificial bread. That's what Jesus did when he allowed his disciples to pick and eat grain as they walked through the field on the Sabbath. And that is what he did when he healed a man right in front of the Pharisees on the Sabbath. Sometimes breaking the rules is the right thing to do. Jesus made that clear when he asked the authorities whether it was lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath. He knew he was essentially thumbing his nose at all the religious leaders by healing that man right in front of their faces in the synagogue on the Sabbath, with the entire crowd watching to see what he would do. He knew his miracle would make him even less popular with the powerful. He knew he was technically breaking the rules of his own religion, but he also knew his faith required him to act in love, even when being loving required him to do something that broke the rules. He had the courage to live his convictions. What about us? Do we have the courage of Jesus? Are we courageous like David? Or of all the encounters we've had with characters in our lives, do we identify more closely with the cowardly lion from the Wizard of Oz? Do we hide from our own shadow? Do our knees shake when we have to face a frightening task? Do we sweat when we have a very difficult challenge? Are we afraid to speak up when we see somebody being treated unfairly, or when we hear somebody talking in a way that demeans another person? It's okay to be afraid. It doesn't matter how scared we are. Even the cowardly lion came through for his friends, not because he was a tower of courage, but because he loved them more than he feared the possible consequences of doing what was right. He didn't know he could be brave until after he had been. It's easy to look at the life of King David and put him on a pedestal of courage. After all, he was just a child when he began doing amazing, brave deeds. He protected his father's sheep from lions. He killed the mighty giant Goliath. He was a very successful leader of troops in battles, and he led his nation to greatness. But he also had his share of fear and desperation. Many of the Psalms have been attributed to him. Many of those Psalms speak of his fear and his desperation. Many plead with God for help through challenges facing his enemies. It's even easier to put Jesus on that pedestal of courage. After all, he is Jesus. But even Jesus had fears. Even Jesus had moments when he wasn't a rock-solid tower of courage. Even Jesus cried. He wept when he saw the grief of Mary and Martha over the death of Lazarus. He sweated blood as he prayed for another rout in the Garden of Gethsemane before his arrest. He cried out in agony from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But he did what was right in spite of his emotions. There's a movie with some great life lessons in it called We Bought a Zoo. One lesson that gets repeated in the movie is about living with courage. At one point in the movie, the father and teenage son are having a heart-to-heart conversation. The son is in the middle of a relationship problem. He says, "Sometimes you embarrass yourself if you say something, and sometimes you embarrass yourself if you don't." The dad responds by giving his son the same words of wisdom he had heard many years before that had a powerful impact on his own life. Sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage 20 seconds of embarrassing bravery, and I promise you something great will come of it. Sometimes as followers of Christ, as people committed to living the great commandment, we need 20 seconds of courage. We don't have to be all big and bold and brave 100% of the time, just for those little 20-second moments that demand our actions. It's okay to be afraid the second before we open our mouth to speak. It's okay to have knocking knees and to feel ourselves sweat as we anticipate the discomfort of taking action. It's okay to feel sick to our stomachs and all shaky inside after we've done something very brave, just so we do it. We need to be willing to claim our courage in teeny tiny doses if that's what it takes in order to be faithful to our call as Christians. Any of us can be brave for 20 seconds. We can all hold our breath that long. We can all push through any situation for 20 seconds. And on the other side, we'll be like the cowardly lion who discovered his biggest fear was being afraid. And that love conquered that fear, giving him the courage to act when his friends were in danger. Our friends, our neighbors, are in danger. Some are in political danger and need our voices to pressure the people in power to bring change. Some are in danger because of poverty. Some are in danger because of lack of access to nutrition, clean water, health care, education, employment, shelter. Some are in danger because they're being made to feel like their very personhood is valueless. It is our job as people who claim the title Christian to live with the courage of Jesus. Regardless of the social protocols, regardless of the rules that are in place, regardless of the behavior that is expected of us, we need to do what is right, even when what is right is against the rules. Because sometimes the opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. We need to be willing to step away from conformity when necessary. We need to do what is loving, even when it feels terrifying. We need to find our 20 seconds of insane courage. The first time David encountered a lion when he was alone tending the sheep, I bet his initial reaction was fear. I bet he was terrified. In fact, I bet the reason he was able to defeat that lion was because he was too afraid not to. He found his temporary courage. He stood and fought instead of running, since running probably wouldn't have worked anyway. I doubt that that boy out in that field could have outrun a hungry lion. But what was remembered for all these generations was his courage. His teeny tiny 20 seconds of courage. Not his initial reaction of fear. Not his crying, shaking reaction following his victory. But those reactions of fear were probably much longer than that act of bravery. Still, what we remember about David the shepherd boy is that he was brave in the face of danger. Fortunately, we do have a few records of Jesus being afraid. Otherwise, it'd be even easier to let ourselves off the hook for facing our fears. We could tell ourselves we can't do things Jesus did because he was Jesus, and we're just us. He was 1/3 of the Trinity. We're 100% human. But his tears, his fears, his prayers, his calling out to God in desperation remind us that he was also fully human, just like us. Except he had a well-exercised ability to boldly, profoundly, be unshakably brave for 20 seconds whenever he needed to be. Courage is a lot like a muscle. If you never use it, You won't have much of it. If you do use it, though, you'll be able to find it easier the next time that you need it. In our reading today, Jesus had the courage to channel God's love, even when he knew that showing that love was against the rules of his religion, his culture, his norm. Being faithful to the commandment to love is far more important than being obedient to laws. Being loving is more important than being socially acceptable. Extending God's love to others is more important than following protocol. In our lives, we have many, many moments that call for bravery. We see things that just aren't right. We hear things. We read things. We have difficult moments. We have choices. We can choose to ignore the wrongs that we see. We can find our courage, and we can do something to bring change. We are called to continue the ministry of Jesus. We are called to be his physical presence in this world, speaking truth to power, standing up for the marginalized, giving love to all of God's children. Sometimes that's easy. Sometimes being beacons of light and love is so much fun. Sometimes it is the most natural, everyday action that we don't even think about what we're doing. We just do it because we're nice people. Sometimes, though, it's tough. Sometimes we worry about what others will think of us. We wonder what their reaction will be if we speak up, if we break rules. Sometimes we're afraid of looking like a fool, or of failing, or of losing friends. Sometimes we just don't know whether we can be brave enough to do anything. And that's okay. Because we don't have to be that brave for the whole time. We just have to be brave enough to get through one moment at a time. Then the next moment, and then the next. And we can do that. We can claim our identity as a follower of Christ, take a deep breath, and be brave for 20 seconds. May we all be faithful to our call to courage, and we be willing to live out our 20 seconds of bravery each time that courage is needed. Amen.